Hi everyone. I just wanted to personally apologize that all of our listeners that we didn't have any episodes up last week. I just had the hardest week of my life ever last week, and unfortunately we weren't able to put anything up on our platforms. But we are back this week, and we shouldn't foresee any other problems. And I just want to say thank you so much to Harrison. He has been a rock for me during these troubling times. So yeah, thank you for your understanding, and I hope you enjoy this week's episode.
Yeah.
James, James, you ever been lost camping?
No. Have you
Why
been
not?
lost camping?
I mean, not exactly. I was in the right area.
I
Look,
mean,
all I'm saying is that when you go camping, it's supposed to be an adventure, right? You
yeah,
know.
on the trail.
Um, well, here, let me start here. When you go camping, do you like go to uh, like the prefabricated spots where like people put like campers, or do you like, hey, here's a good spot?
No, we do usually do the prefabricated spots because we usually go to like national forests and whatnot, national parks.
Mm. I've never been to like Yellowstone or anything. Have you been
Uh,
there?
yeah, you should go before it
Uh,
disappears.
are you gonna take me?
Okay. We'll do a DCI
Nice.
score report from Yellowstone one year.
Outside.
You know how sick it would be to hear a core while you just have Yellowstone in the background playing
and then at the peak of
ballad,
their show,
right?
you got the geyser go in the background.
We'll do an
Talk
ad
about
for our podcast one day. Just like, do you like to hear the sounds of DCI while imagining the scenery of Yellowstone? Well, we have it for you right here.
That's what it's like to drive a Ford.
As we show a knockoff Matthew McConaughey,
For Mercury or whatever, Lincoln? He's for
Lincoln.
Lincoln.
Yeah, Lincoln is owned by Ford. It's fine.
Man, I can't believe Abraham Lincoln's still putting out cars.
Well, he has to find ways to slay vampires easily somehow.
He's an axe murderer.
Is it murder if they're already dead?
I don't. Are vampires technically dead?
Yeah. They don't have a pulse.
I mean, I guess so. Yeah. And they can't see themselves in their reflection, so they're
Yeah,
ghosts.
and they're not allowed to be in the sun.
Hmm.
Therefore, vampires are dead.
Therefore, vampires are dead. You heard it here first, folks. Jesus, please, I can't speak.
Aman, Anamanapia.
Onomatopoeia.
Amanamana.
I'm an anemone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Marching Arts Podcast, your guide to all things marching. James, how are you?
Marching. Oh, pretty good. How about yourself?
Marching. I'm okay.
Okay. Okay.
James, you and I have been in the
Lovers.
music,
Oh,
yeah,
you're
in
right.
the music industry and
Yeah, that too.
music lovers. Music lovers. Here come the fan fiction. Um,
Oh no.
of over the better part of, I'd say, 10 years.
So a decade.
Yeah, decade plus. Do you remember your first game?
Uh,
Like your first ever high school football game? Not the eighth grade night, because we've
no.
talked about that in the past, but like your
Right.
first ever in marching band football game.
No, probably not. I can probably tell you I was probably heckin' nervous as heck. Heckers. Um,
Heck.
and I know I probably didn't play anything, and I just counted on making sure I hit my dots and didn't miss any of my spots. Because I don't think that would be anything more embarrassing than just like forgetting your drill on the first game. Could you
Yeah, fair
imagine?
enough. Oh man, I feel like I feel like on my first show, I don't even think our show was done on my first.
No, I don't think many high school bands ever had their shows done by the first week.
So, but I do remember that I was nervous big time.
Right. Did your
But I do love it because, you know, when you get into band for the first time, you get real stressed out, real tired, real sore, learning all this stuff, right? You're gonna stand here holding this thing up all day, put my arms in the air all day, and then you get to march your first game, your first show on a football field under
Right.
Friday night lights, and I mean, that's something I haven't forgotten. My first game, um, that we performed at was North Cobb versus MLK.
Oh, okay.
And
Was it like
it
a
was
clone of 11 Martin Luther Kings on both sides of the ball, or was it?
no, I don't think so.
Oh, I'm
What a
sorry.
what a
Was it,
team that would be though.
or was it the OG MLK that pinned multiple copies of commandments on people's doors? Was he just pinning commandments on people's helmets?
No, I don't think that was it. It did go into
Okay.
overtime though, so it felt like it dragged on forever.
Okay.
And that was our first game. It's so exciting. We lost, but it was very
Aw.
exciting. um, and we were doing a Thriller show. We're doing a Michael Jackson show.
Oh, okay.
And it was fun. So we busted out in the Thriller dance halfway
Mhm.
through the show, and it was great. So
Speaking
maybe
of
we did have it
Thriller,
done by then.
I feel like if you are doing a Thriller show, it's really thrilling for you, but everybody else who isn't part of that show is like, oh boy, another band. Here we go, doing
Oh boy,
Thriller
yeah,
again.
doing Thriller.
Did you
Man,
guys
how
do
did?
the dance?
Yeah, so I said we busted out in the Thriller dance halfway
Okay.
through the show.
That's nice.
And the homestand went nuts.
Right.
So, and that's another thing that I really liked about my first game. That if you've never been in an organized sport, you never really played for a group or a crowd or anything like that. Doing something in your show and then seeing the crowd's reaction to it
Right.
is so awesome. Um, and for me, that kind of fueled like my whole experience for my first game, like how I
Mm-hmm.
felt, because I was super nervous. I was like, man, I really want to do oh crap, we're playing stand tunes. And then we did the halftime show, and I was pumped for the for the second half. Man,
Right.
I was pumped. I like best feeling ever when you get the first game out of the way. I don't know if everyone feels that way. I don't know if you felt that way in your first game.
I was definitely pumped, but also nervous at the same time. I think I was more relieved that the halftime show was over, but also like felt good that I actually remembered all my stuff.
Yeah, it's
And
like
like I
satisfying.
survived, yeah, and that like, oh, it's the second half now. I can third quarter break and then fourth quarter just have fun, play stand tunes the entire time. So I
Right,
think for me it was more so the first season. I definitely remember the first season more so than like the first game because I think there's a lot of things that just come up during the first season.
right.
And I guess the first game for us, well, I mean, for most schools, it's usually like a non-conference game playing against somebody who's like close-ish but has no what
Like no stake.
yeah, no consequences on the season itself. So
Right.
um I guess most memorable football games would just be the rivalry games. So
Yeah, and they're always unspoken rivalries. Like it what
well, it's
well, I
funny
mean,
that
they're
you mentioned
spoken
that.
into existence,
So
but
you always have your rival high school, so like Roswell's Milton High School, but then you have other schools who like pretend that they're your rival, and you're like, no, I don't know
no.
where you get this complex from. I guess it's more of like a little brother complex at that point. And they're like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, we're your rival. We totally want to beat you. And then like when they finally beat you, they hang on to that for the whole fucking year. And like you're like, oh cool, you beat us, whatever. Um, so I guess and those games don't really come into like memory, so it's really just like the true rivalry games that I just remember. But again, speaking about rivalry games, I guess there's some other schools like the Corky Kell Classic, which, if you don't know, is a football like tournament weekend that's held at the now Mercedes-Benz Stadium, I believe, in Atlanta.
It was at the Dome.
Right, and so it invites like the couple of the top football teams in Cobb County to compete against.
I think I don't know if it's Cobb County alone.
Right, but they invite some of the top football teams in the southeast
I think
region,
it's
right?
I think it's like, yeah, and like it's not just Georgia either. I
Right.
don't think.
So I guess for some of those people, like, can you imagine your first football game playing in an NFL-sized stadium? Obviously, it's not
right, and
filled with all
having that
people.
reverb. Like, let's
Right.
talk about that.
Right.
um, I mean, for me, if that was my first game and I was in Mercedes Benz or the Georgia Dome, we'll talk
Right.
our time period. If it was in the Georgia Dome, man, I don't think I would have had self control.
You would have peed yourself in excitement.
Well, I don't know about that. I did really have to pee in my first game. So, word of advice to people that are gonna have their first games this year, if you're listening to this podcast,
Hydrate, but don't overhydrate.
hydrate before you dihydrate, but make sure you use the bathroom before you're in your parade
Right.
block.
When you are putting on your uniform, go to the bathroom.
Make that part of your daily routine.
Because usually, what you
so
put on.
that way, if sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, like, usually that last 15 minutes is like, okay, put on your uniform, grab your instruments and gloves, head to parade block. So just while you're putting on your bibbers, assuming you have bibbers, just go to the bathroom.
Well, and also just personal advice. If this is your first time suiting up for a game, I would give yourself about 30 minutes to get your uniform on.
That's a long time.
Well, think about it, because you're going to want to get it perfect, and you'll take a while to get it on. Because when you first put it on, you know it's for when you're getting fitted, and a lot of bands don't put it back on until game day.
Right.
So they may have forgotten how to put it on if it's not like an easy zip up. You know, like if it's like with the sashes and the buttons and things like that. I'd give yourself 20 to 30 minutes depending on what you have to do. Like, and also in case if you forget gloves or anything like that, you can figure out how to get some.
Speaking of
what's up?
We keep doing that today.
I know, man.
I was gonna say we had front clipping collars, so like instead of buttons, it was like a clip. And obviously, it was super hard because the clip is literally like
itty bitty.
Yeah, like 2 or 3 millimeters.
Had them too.
Yeah. So the first game, everybody except for the freshmen had kept this a secret the entire season. So everybody just starts going when it's like, all right, 15 minutes, you get the whistles, 15 minutes parade block, everybody starts putting on the uniforms, and everybody who's not a freshman or a new person is like, all right, they turn to like their friends, like, come do me. And all the freshmen were like, what the heck are we talking about here? And then you finally learn that doing somebody means doing their front clip for them, so they don't have to do it themselves. So that was pretty funny.
We did. We had the button too, the top buttons.
Oh yeah.
Pads. And then we would do that there too. Hey, I need you to do me.
Right. So
I need you to get me real good.
I know we're sidetracking a little bit, but did your uniform zip up in the front or in the back?
The back.
Okay.
In high school, it zipped up in the back, and we didn't have anything else. So ours was simple in high school. We, you put it on, and someone walks up behind you and zips your back up. Some people were flexible enough to get it themselves. Right. I was able to zip up my own uniform only my freshman year.
Oh, I was able to do it all 4 years.
I was only able to do it freshman year. I don't know why. Guess I just lost my flexibility. But I think all of those things put together, right? I've talked, talking about getting excited for game, being nervous for the game, allowing time to go to the bathroom and put on your uniform. I think all of that ties into the mentality of the entire day's like game time.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like, hey, is game time. It's time to
Yeah.
get ready, like get hyped, get pumped up.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's
and
definitely a much more different feeling than like say first competition or even first parade, because like parades are definitely the most chill. Then it's
oh yeah,
game days, and then it's competition days. So
competitions.
leadership, if you're listening, always just remember like, hey, how did you feel when it was your first everything, and like try to what's the word, sympathize with your fellow underclassmen slash newbies, and you just make sure you include them on everything and make sure that they're having fun and taking their mind off of the whole fact that like, oh my god, this is the first time I'm ever going to perform as a performer. And like a lot of people are like, whatever, it's my first game. But there are some people that get really bad performance anxiety. So,
Yeah, I mean that's a big deal. And you know that all again, I'm going to continue using that word. That all kind of ties into game time, right? As a leadership team, you know, or if you're a drum major, you know, as a leadership team, it's like it's not like it is your job to drive that excitement.
mm,
Um, and I said this, you know, to several of the drum majors I've taught and to Kennesaw State. Um, if you give 150% of what you're asking, of like what you're asked for, you will receive about 65% back. So the more you make it seem like this is the greatest thing in the world and it's about to be the funnest day ever, the more likely the band will follow you on it.
yeah,
But you have to do that from the start. Like if you're pretty lax during your band camp, during kind of just getting started with the program, and then all of a sudden game day comes around and you're just hype, 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 then the people are going to think that's fake.
right,
Um, so you have to give 150% of what you're being asked all the time, and that goes not and that's across the board. That's not just drum majors. That's leadership too.
yeah,
Because if the members sense like I'm gonna if the members can smell weakness on you, they will find a way to not
exploit
be
it.
as
Yeah.
dedicated. Yeah.
But speaking
Um,
of game time, did you get game time mentality from marching band, or did you get it from something else?
to be honest, outside of this podcast, you and I are really into football, and by football we mean international football.
Si, senor.
And me into baseball.
Yeah.
Um, I know you're really into hockey. We're really into sports.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but honestly, I think that really started for me with marching band. I think I learned that the idea of game time is time to get hyped. It's time to get it's time for business. I think I learned that from marching band. And I'm really grateful for that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a lot of people may have learned it from like a kid's sport, like if they grew up playing football and then went to high school and was in marching band, or fill in the blank of child sport.
Right.
People might have thought differently, but for me, I definitely got the idea of game time, my perception of game time, getting ready for business, from marching band. I don't. Do you share that, or did you get it from something else?
Yes and no. I used to play tennis through like end of elementary school, all through middle school. Um, and obviously that's a very one-on-one sport. So like it's just you and the other opponent, and you're a kid, so there's no crowds. So in that sense, I
Right.
wasn't performing for anybody, but obviously you want to win, so you got to be in the mind frame of like, let's not screw up, let's play
Right.
within our own game. If they're gonna
Right.
beat me, they need to beat me, not let myself be myself. So that part of it translated where like, okay, I need to be within myself, and like do what I can do best. But then marching band did bring the whole like, oh, I need to perform for hundreds, if not thousands, of people. So I definitely did learn that aspect, and so it's always been fine for me performing in a group, um, for a crowd. But if you're like, hey, James, do a solo, nah, I'm out.
No. I also want to highlight something you talked about that I think is really important.
Mhm.
You talked about how in tennis it's one on one, right?
Right.
It's you versus that other person. Where, um, so if you make a mistake or if there's something that goes wrong, you basically have to self analyze that and you have to eat that.
Right.
And it's very important to those listening to this that are first getting into marching band. Marching band is a group effort.
Yeah.
Every person in that marching band matters. I don't, if the culture says otherwise, that's a problem. Because every person in that marching band matters. Um, on any facet. Especially if you're a rehearsal tech.
Right.
You are a rehearsal tech. You are about as important as the director themselves.
Yeah.
So,
So
um, but anyway,
yeah, and
where I'm
marching
trying to
band,
get
it's like you are responsible for yourself, but you're also sort of responsible for everybody else.
right, and but where I was trying to get at is after your freshman year, or even in your freshman year, you'll figure this out pretty quick. Um, Once you are up to speed and you know what you're doing, you can prescribe and fix your issues. And you're more or less, now you're more concerned on how's my band doing. You're gonna find out who your band rival is,
Yeah.
because your band rival is different from the football rival sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, and and it's really gonna bring a whole new meaning to the word game time, to the word preparation, and dedication. Um, it's band is an incredibly competitive sport because it is a sport. Um, and it's I mean it's great, man. I gotta wrap that up because I seriously that's a man.
Talk
I would
forever.
bring that up. I would talk forever about that. That's something I talk to leadership teams about. That's
Yeah.
it's a big deal. Um,
Who? Well, here's a question then. Who do you think is most prepared for band, like the first band performance out of anybody that joins marching band?
like who does the? I don't think I understand.
So like, let's say, like, do you think a kid who used to play team sports like soccer in middle school is really going to be prepped well for marching band in high school, or do you think like the drama kids slash like the musical kids will be, or maybe even the dance kids will be really well prepped for marching band? Like, what do you think? What do you think like a upbringing would be really would really translate to marching band?
Okay, gotcha. So I'm gonna have three answers for you. And there's three different activities I'm gonna pick from. Number one, um, I would say probably my top. I would say would be dancers. Because they learn time, they know how to control their body. And if and this is assuming they're already a musician. If they're a musician already, and they're also a dancer, then I mean, you're like marching band will be a quick learn for you.
Right.
Because
Especially
you're
if you
used to
join
learning
guard.
multiple steps. Exactly, especially if you learn guard or join guard. Um, Number two, I would say, is most likely people coming in from um, like normal music program, like a concert program.
Hmm.
So like that are in an ensemble, from and I'm talking specifically about the eighth to ninth, into ninth grade transition because they know how to play their instrument.
Right.
Now they just have to learn how to control their body.
Right.
So, um, I think those individuals are going to have an advantage because there's people that'll join marching band that haven't really played an instrument before.
Right.
Um, a lot of times they'll either join drumline or color guard. Um, but I mean, it's possible. It takes a lot of work, but it's possible. Um, and then the third one is your sports, the team sports, because they're going to be used to the long practices, being out in the heat. Their body's going to be conditioned, and they're used to reps and reps and reps of drills. Now, where I think those each have their drawbacks, dancers have more, they're used to a more, their reps are up and down. Color guard, there's times where you're not standing, where you're sitting. There's times when you're, doing a more in place kind of work versus moving and doing work. And dancers, a lot of time, unless you come from a gymnastics background for dance, a lot of times you're more stationary. Or you have like micro drill that you do while you dance, versus moving, 60, 70 yards
Right.
plus.
Jazz run.
Right. So that's where I feel like dancers have a little bit of a disadvantage. Um, the musician side of it, disadvantage, obviously being not used to body control, not used to hot weather, and being outside all day. In some cases, and I'm speaking generally. Obviously, I'm not speaking for every single individual that has ever done this. But I think that's the disadvantage there. And then for team sports, um, it's sure you're used to being outside and having the long practices, but you're not used to being literally standing the entire time.
Yeah.
You're used to shorter, you do a drill, and then you sit down for a minute while someone else is like doing a drill. Then you get up and do your part of the drill. Or you get a break and things like that. But for band, it's go, 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 like
Yeah.
all day. So I think those are my top three, for who's going to be the most prepared.
Right. And that's not to
Um,
say like only those three groups can succeed. Literally everybody can succeed. So don't like take
oh,
this as a
absolutely.
don't take this, oh no, I need to do one of those before I join band. It's like, no, we're hypothesizing like, I wonder what would be like the most efficient way of being prepared for band.
Right. Now, my thing is if you are a musician that's going to do marching band, you definitely have a leg up on people that aren't
Yeah.
already musicians.
Because it takes a lot longer to learn an instrument than it is to control your body.
Right, and we talked a little bit about this with Dr. Meals. If you are coming into band camp, stretch. Take the time to stretch. Right, it's really important. Your muscles need that growth, that flexibility, so that you don't hurt yourself in the season. Because any little small thing could tweak a muscle, pinch a
Oh.
nerve, and your whole leg is like not done for, but like it's
It's no
tight,
fun.
or you get
Yeah.
like or like you get Charlie horses in the middle of
Yeah.
practice. You ever had one of those?
No, luckily not.
I had one in high school, and it
Oh,
sucked right in the
yeah.
middle of practice.
Ouch. Okay, here is a controversial topic. What do you think about middle school marching bands? And also tangentially, how do you feel about those eighth graders that have been sort of like pre-scouted to join the high school marching band early?
Um, I mean, I feel like it's a natural progression of things. I'm not against the middle school band thing,
Mm-hmm.
marching thing. My but my official opinion is that they don't need to be doing competitive marching. Like if
Right,
anything, do parades.
right.
But I would not be sitting here teaching because they're 12, right? They're in sixth
Yeah,
grade. They're like 12.
yeah. 11, 12,
12,
13.
13. Yeah, 12, 13 years old. Like I again, a lot of them come from team sports, and there's some crazy parents out there that will make them stand outside for 13 hours for baseball camp. And which is crazy, but but there's kids that aren't, and when those kids were to get into like marching band, I mean that's hard.
Yeah.
So my opinion is I'm okay with it, but I think it needs to be very limited to what they do. um and you'll have to forgive me, I kind of forgot the back half of your question. I
Um,
focused on the first half.
yeah, how do you feel about those eighth graders that sort of get recruited to join the high school marching band early because they either are really good players or
Oh,
maybe they have older siblings in the band already, stuff like that?
gotcha. I think that's a natural. I also think that's kind of a natural progression of things, because I mean, if your older siblings in it and you're also districted to go to that school,
Hmm.
then I mean you're gonna end up at the school anyway.
Right.
um, but also on the same coin, come on, high school directors, like don't be over here trying to poach like draft people from middle school. Like,
Right. Um,
um,
I don't know.
this
I
isn't.
just my biggest concern would just be like the burnout factor. That's a lot of fall fall Friday nights to give up
Yeah,
slash fall just nights to give up as a kid. I know, yeah,
yeah.
there's a lot of people who do extracurriculars, but I don't know,
On
I feel
top of
like
band.
yeah, I think the magic of band is having those high school football games and um performing for bigger crowds and
Yeah,
going to competitions and those bus rides.
absolutely.
So,
And there's another thing that we're kind of not mentioning here. And I just thought about this. When you're talking about middle school, kind of set up into going into high school. There's middle schoolers that'll have those parents that were like super into marching band,
right,
super into the marching arts, WGI, indoor, all of those things, and they'll get their kid involved in like DCI
right.
and all those things are like 12, 13 years old
Yeah.
when they're allowed to do it for the first time. And talking about burnout,
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, you take a 12-year-old in sixth grade, that's that which is a very trying emotional time for a kid, because middle school is hard.
Yeah.
Um, and
You're
now
shipping them off
take
to
take six, 7 weeks.
quasi
Yeah,
military boot camp.
it's actually 8 weeks because you got to think they start doing camps before that.
Yeah.
So it's you got eight. You're sending your kid off to basically summer, like 8 week summer camp, and they're gonna come back completely drained. Oh, and by the way, here's more marching band you have to do in the fall.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think that is a big burnout potential. Um,
And obviously there are
and that kind of
kids that like will love doing it and they'll be like, yeah, I marched DCI from 14 all the way up to age out, so that's 7 years. And I marched high school and I marched college, and like I loved it, but
right.
that's not the norm.
Their poor knees,
Yeah.
knees and ankles. Um, that kind of that makes me think about my again going back to our own kind of past and how much we got out of it and all the awesome memories we got out of it.
Hmm.
But I mean, was it everything that you dreamt it would be when you got in there?
Uh, I are
And
you talking about like
and
the
I mean,
first
we're
game
pretty
or just
honest.
like
So,
the
oh,
whole
I'm just talking about the whole experience.
Yeah, I think so. I met a lot of lifelong friends, learned a lot of life skills, and carry through to this day. So I definitely think I didn't know what I was getting into when I first joined. But I don't regret anything about um doing it, and I think if I could recommend it to anybody or say like, did I enjoy it? I would say yeah, every single time. Um, I guess maybe my competitive side would say, oh, maybe I wish we had one more things, but I mean that's really out of my control. Like I can only do
Right.
so much as an individual, and like sure I can try to convince other people like, oh, try harder or like let's practice a little bit more. But again, there's always gonna be somebody's better. So
Right.
it's definitely not the norm to be the band that's always winning competitions.
Yeah, absolutely. Just because you're in a band program that's not, winning BOA and winning
Right.
all your local, it does not mean you're a bad band. Doesn't mean anything like that.
Right.
Um, I mean, I agree. I think the important thing that you get out of this experience is our lifelong friends, lifelong memories. You get to learn a lot of really crucial social aspects to life.
Yeah.
Um, and you get to learn good and bad.
Yeah.
Um, about and you get a lot of experiences. So, awesome.
Yeah. You definitely set
Um,
up a lot of social contracts in marching band.
yeah,
And that is a
yeah,
thing that you definitely need to learn in the adult world. So, like, there might be people you don't like, but you still got to work with. Band sets you up for that perfectly. Um, there's people you got to take instructions from you may not like your band directors. You will definitely take that all throughout your life. So, especially if you're a middle schooler who is awkward AF, but band is a chance for you to learn how to socialize with other people. And sure, even if
absolutely.
you come out with like just one or two friends, that's still better than zero. So,
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, one or two friends can make a world difference.
yeah,
Um, so we kind of talked about our first football game, kind of talked about our first year,
Mm,
and what our experience was. And and to kind of piggyback off of what we talked about last week,
right.
do you remember your first parade?
Ooh, no,
No,
not really. No.
to be honest, I really don't either,
Right.
because
Again, like,
they're all
yeah,
kind of the same thing.
they all mold into the same memory because it's always the same parade. It's always the same parade route.
Yeah.
Um, your director's probably always choosing the same song anyways. It's always on like the same day as well, so that really doesn't help. Um,
No, and you always got to get up really early,
yeah,
and
and
so it's
it's
all
like,
kind of a blur anyway.
yeah, and it's not like your first football game where like the opponents are usually different. It's like it's always the same people at the same parade.
Oh
So,
yeah, because they're
um,
usually always local, so you always
right,
get the same couple. You get the like 2, 3 high schools
yeah,
in the area,
I
unless
think,
you're Cobb County and there's like 20.
yeah, I think the the only thing I remember from my first parade is how physical marching for a long time can be.
Hmm.
Because for at least our program, our first parade was always before our first game.
Right.
So marching for 15, 20, 30 minutes, that definitely puts a lot of strain, especially when you are told, bring your toes up as high as you can and roll through your step. And you're doing
Right.
that for 30 minutes. Uh, you don't realize how much that takes out of you until you actually do that. And like, again, maybe your first experience would have been like a game, so it was only 8 to 12 minutes. But again, even then I'm sure that was still like, holy crap, roll stepping for 8 to 12 minutes. That's actually a lot of extra energy out of
Right.
you.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I mean, when you're new to that, like if you do straight leg, like when individuals come to band for the first time and learn straight leg, that's
mm,
exhausting.
yeah,
Man, I'll tell you what, if you're listening to this and you're gearing up for camp and that's why you're listening to us talk about it,
mm,
um, man, straight leg's hard. It is. Straight leg and chair step. If
yeah. I was
you're
about to
going to
say if
HBCU,
you're doing a traditional step, start just doing high knees as a.
just walking around your house, just
Yeah.
always do high knees, always.
And I know like we shouldn't be telling
um,
middle schoolers and like high schoolers, well, some high schoolers, like you shouldn't really have to be doing like a workout regimen, but I feel like for traditional steps, like for traditional marching, yeah,
I
you
agree.
might want to have a workout routine.
You might want to go a little beyond stretching.
Right. And like,
um,
especially if you're holding a heavier instrument, you gotta get those
oh
shoulders up.
man, Sousa's big time, man.
Yeah.
Try to, if you're a Sousa player or a Contra player going to your high school, um, I would contact your high school to see if they'll let you take your instrument early, like a
Mm,
month early, and just practice holding that thing.
right.
Just put it on, walk around the yard, walk around the neighborhood. If you're not really in a neighborhood, just stand in there in your house. Just
Yeah.
wear the
Just
thing.
watch TV
It
while wearing it.
Yeah, just watch TV,
Watch the
watch
podcast.
the watch the podcast. Listen to us talk about it. Watch the ceiling.
Yeah.
Um, if you're a Sousa player, watch the ceiling. Um,
And door
but
frames.
yeah, and door frames. But I figure at that point, if you're not outside,
Right.
you're not really gonna transfer from inside to outside.
Well, I mean,
Um,
you might put on your sousaphone in the bedroom and then walk out to the living room.
yeah.
Mom, leave me alone.
Um,
I'm putting on my sousaphone.
leave me alone. I played Sousa. with the giant embouchure.
Right.
Um, all of that to say though, I think if you go to band camp and you learn your marching and then you do parades, I feel like you're naturally just already prepared for your first parade.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
more or less, the only other thing you're adding on there
I
is because
just,
they're not going to give you songs that you don't know
well,
to
yeah, I'm just
play.
saying, like, parades are always at least 30 minutes long, and I don't think any band practice really makes you carry your instrument for that long or march for that long without a break. So just be aware of
Well,
that.
it depends on how they do basics. Because I've definitely been in basic blocks and led basic blocks that have lasted longer than 30 minutes.
Oh, geez. But is your basic
So
block constantly marching?
it's not
Usually you
constantly
reset,
marching, but they're
right?
constantly holding the instrument. And also in
Right.
a parade, you're not also constantly marching because remember, there's always those pauses. You
Yeah.
always get too close to the one in front, so you got to stop for a second. Um,
I mean, you're still
and
marking time.
you also have parade rests where you're not actually holding your instrument at attention. Now there's some groups that are cruel and they'll make you hold it at attention the entire parade,
Oh, Jesus.
and I've seen that, and I feel so bad for those kids.
Especially those baritones.
Oh
What is
man,
it with, like, here's another tangent. What is it with? I feel like the skinnier you are, the more likely you get stuck with a baritone.
I don't know. Um,
Every high school kid that marched baritone in my high school had like the arms that were like as thin as like a broom.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was a really skinny kid. I played trombone, so
Right.
um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's any correlation to that. If you're listening to this, why don't you give us a shout out? How big are the arms of your baritone player?
I mean, I guess it is technically more on the shoulders, so your arms don't necessarily have to be as strong, but still, it's a bloody baritone.
They're heavy.
You know?
Um, for I kind of want to circle back. We talked a little bit about competitions and things,
Hmm.
but there's also exhibitions.
Yeah.
If you're new, a competition is where it is exactly what it sounds like. You're going up against other bands. You're competing for a score. There's trophies, prizes,
Judging.
bragging rights,
Yeah.
all of those things. Whereas an exhibition is typically where you have bands in the area,
Right.
like in your school district, that'll all get together and have a exhibition where you basically just watch the shows. It doesn't matter how big the band is. There's no ranking. There's no scores.
Right.
But a lot of exhibitions will still have judges, so they'll get judging feedback,
Right.
although no scoring. Um, and for me personally, I would prefer to do exhibitions left, right, and sideways, upside down.
Yeah.
Uh, Reason being because one, there's less pressure,
Yeah.
and two, a lot of bands will like bring in like the extra fun stuff into their
Yeah.
show for exhibition since they're not getting scored.
Yeah, I was about to
Um,
say there's also you're not competing with anybody, so like yeah, people might want you to do well, but they don't want you to do well as they did at a competition. Because
oh
ultimately you do
yeah,
want to win. So like at an exhibition, it's like, hey, we want everybody to do their best and have their best show possible, just so we can see, the amount of skill that is out there. But again, at a competition, when you know that a band that's in your caption is competing, you're like, well, I want you to do well, but not that well.
but not that well.
Right.
Um, so exhibitions though, I really do feel like prepare you for competitions because you get
Hmm.
to get used to that.
Right.
It's a good like precursor to a competition.
Now, you
Um,
were in what, Cobb County, right?
yeah,
And your
Cobb County.
exhibitions were over 2 days, correct? So you guys
Yes.
didn't get to go see like every single group, right?
Well, so they would. So I don't know if they still do this, but when I was in high school, they would let the students like if you brought your student ID because we got student IDs for like library cards and
Right.
things like that. If you brought that to the exhibition and you were in one of the high schools, they'd let you in. You wouldn't have to pay.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Oh, that's right, because
but
yours were at night times, right?
correct.
Right.
So
Okay.
I don't necessarily know if they still do that because
Right.
thinking about that is kind of a logistical nightmare.
But were the
Um,
South Cobb bands different than the North Cobb bands?
yes, absolutely.
Right.
So in exhibitions, you definitely get to see all different types.
Right.
There's so like Osborne in Cobb County is a traditional style band.
Right.
And they but they're like the only one in Cobb County that do
Oh,
it.
okay.
Um, and that show is phenomenal to watch. It's so much fun.
Hmm.
Um, and then you have places like Lassiter and Kennesaw Mountain that
Right.
are incredibly, I mean,
BOA style.
more or less on the elite BOA level.
Right.
And then you have places like where I went, like North Cobb, which were really, really strong programs, but they weren't necessarily elite programs.
Right.
We weren't competing for the top spot in BOA all the time, or even in
Yeah, I
our.
think most of the country would consider North Cobb like elite, but in Cobb County, you were just very good.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
So there's a few counties in the country that are really high
stupid. Yeah,
caliber, and Cobb County is one of those. So yes, what I'm saying is coming from a place of privilege, and I understand that. But I don't know any different,
right,
unfortunately. But you know, whereas somebody might consider North Cobb elite, North Cobb in the Cobb County sense was kind of mid.
right, mid tier. And
At
so
least
I
when I was
think,
there, I
yeah,
haven't kept up with them in a while.
and I think we're both privileged in the fact that we did get to see a mix of traditional and I don't know what I wouldn't call them modern, but maybe like more so
It's
competitive marching.
it's typically called traditional and core style.
Oh, Core Star, there we go.
Um,
So, and I'm assuming that it's probably not like that where counties will have both. It's either one or the other in each county. So I feel like we're privileged. But again, if you're somebody out there who only had just one, and then we're also missing like there's chair stepping traditional, but then there's like what Big Ten traditional, which is like
yes,
45s instead of 90s. So um,
correct.
there's just a lot of
That's
variety
like the
out there,
college style. It's like
right?
the college style.
And a lot of high schools in like the Midwest will do the college style because again, that's all they
The Big
know,
Ten.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
And but there's something to be said about those too, because the Big Ten style, like Ohio State, is Ohio State Big Ten? I don't know.
yes,
But Ohio State's marching band is very famous.
right,
They have a huge program and a very quick turnaround on their shows. I think they do a new one every week.
yeah, they get paid, I
Um,
believe, too,
yeah, I mean, but it's a very difficult
right?
program.
You,
And people like to mimic that kind of thing. So it's like that's where you get groups that are you can tell where the director's influence came from when they,
mm,
write for shows, or where the band's influence came from when it was created. Like for North Cobb, we came from the core style. The director of the band for us was a previous drum major of Spirit of Atlanta,
okay,
and was a DCI judge that did has judged the finals, the semifinals. It was a very well respected judge.
right,
Um, and then same with our assistant director, who was a indoor judge, WGI judge, and things like that. Whereas there's other places like you said on the Midwest where their directors will be more collegiate, or they'll have come from like Iowa, or they'll
right,
come from more traditional type programs.
mm,
Um, so that's a question to ask for our listeners: is do you guys do exhibitions in your town, in your district?
right. Because there are
Um,
some counties that only have one high school, so it's like, what would the
right.
point of having an exhibition with just yourself, unless you had like a tri-county exhibition, which I'm sure there are as well.
I'm sure there are.
And just to your point, I think our program was pretty fortunate when I was there, at least after our first director left, our second director did march Spirit of Atlanta as a trumpet, and our middle school feeder, our band director, he marched timpani with cavies back in like the 70s. So we definitely had that DCI feel, not necessarily style, but we still had that feel to our programs. And obviously, all of our
Yeah,
staff usually were like, yeah, I work with WGI groups or yada, yada, yada. So,
right. And all that to say, I think exhibitions are really, really beneficial to a young band individual, because also on exhibitions, that's when college groups will come to play,
yeah,
or a DCI group will come to play for the exhibition. And you get to see some crazy shows, because college programs, and you can attest to this as well. College programs will go all out
yeah.
for exhibitions, man, because those are
They
those
had to
are their
travel.
recruiting
Yeah.
events.
And they had to
Yeah.
travel super far. So they might as well get their money's worth.
Oh yeah, they'll do like 20-minute shows and stuff for exhibitions, man. I
Yeah.
remember we did a pop-up exhibition at Lassiter. Um, yeah, I don't know where or you might have graduated by that point. But man, that
No, yeah, I
that
didn't go
thing
to
seemed to
Lassiter.
last. That thing
Well,
seemed like it lasted forever.
I do realize, though, sorry, I got a cat here in my mouth. cut that
Well, you're
out.
also surrounded by cats.
Right. I don't know what it is, but high school judging is always taking flipping forever.
Yes.
Like you would go to a competition, you would end, the last band would go, and then you literally just be sitting there for an hour.
Well, I think part of it is because high school judging has a lot more numbers involved. There's a lot more actual judges, and they eliminate top and bottom scores and things like that
I mean,
at
I
the high school level.
guess, but also
But at
like if
DCI,
you're
there's like two, three per, and they just
right,
take the score.
right, but also for high school, like I mean, if you're scoring them as you go, then theoretically, once the last band goes, then it should just be like, all right, here's I guess probably high school is probably all pen and or pencil and paper, so then you gotta like shuffle all the papers and then put them all into order score
Yeah, was
wise,
that
and
a
then
9 or a 7?
Terry,
Terry, was that a 9 or a 7?
right? Oh, Terry already left. God damn it. We'll just drop Terry's score, I guess.
We'll just drop it to the
Right.
87. They dropped us to an 87.
Right. But yeah, if you've never been to a competition, be prepared. Like, if you stay for the whole thing, because there are some programs where like, nah, we done, we out. We'll get our
Right.
scores in the email later. But yeah,
Absolutely.
there are times when you will just be, you will watch that last group go, and then you're like, all right, we're gonna sit here for 45 minutes. And obviously do like the superlative awards, like the band that donated the most shout outs, or the band that had the most people, like fun trivia facts while we're waiting. But be prepared.
Absolutely. Be prepared to be sitting around for a while. But that's also part of the fun of competitions. You get to
You
sit
know,
there and it like builds all this anticipation.
you know.
Um so I liked that aspect of it a little bit, somewhat.
So speaking about exhibitions and going right into competitions, did you feel like exhibitions did prepare you for competition?
I do. I feel like it was a good precursor. I feel like, you get to see what it's like to rotate between groups, um, where you get to watch some groups and then all of a sudden your director's like, hey, we gotta go get ready, grab the whole group. Um, and or your cat's trying to knock over your camera.
Yep.
um I short answer is yeah. I think exhibitions really prepared me for competitions. What about you? Do you think they did that for you too?
Yeah, I think so. Just that whole mentality of okay, we're here at a foreign site. Because again, exhibitions were always at a different high school every year, so it's like it was helpful because competitions were always usually at a different location as well. So you're just at a foreign location, you don't know where anything is. You just get told go here, go to this parking lot, warm up in this parking lot. Um, Sometimes there's delays, so then your like band has to sit around, and then like you're like crap. All of our warm up time kind of just got thrown into the toilet,
Right.
and then you gotta like get then you like beg the what's the word,
Organizers.
the organizers or the person who's like in charge of your group, like give us at least 3 minutes to re-warm back up because we've been sitting here 15 minutes. So I definitely do think exhibitions help prepare the mentality. um but again, also it's only halfway because you're not getting judged, and
Well, you might be
um
getting judged. You're not getting scored.
right, you're not getting scored, and like usually it is warmer at exhibitions than it is at competitions. So like you may not know the true battle of trying to stay in tune when it gets much colder at night. um
Yeah,
but
for
yeah, I
sure.
forgot to mention that our exhibitions were always during the day in Fulton County.
Oh,
So we
we
got to
did.
miss
We
school.
had them at night.
Or we didn't miss school. They were always on Saturdays, so it was just during the day. But we did get
Yeah,
to see every
no,
single group show up,
gotcha. We would
have
with
school, and then
their
go.
ours were Friday nights.
Hmm.
No, ours were Monday nights. This is a weird day of the week.
Right.
But we would leave from school early.
Oh, that's nice.
Um, I mean, not gonna lie, it was nice.
Yeah.
NGL.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah.
I
Um.
I feel all of these things to say about exhibitions getting us ready for competitions. I personally still don't feel like I was ready for my very first competition. The nerves were crazy.
And does anybody feel ready for their first competition?
No, I don't. I mean, well, some might. Um, I was not
Are
one
they
of those.
telling the truth when they say they are?
I don't think so.
Right. Even if you marched like DCI, let's say hypothetically you marched DCI before your first ever high school competition, it's always gonna be different no matter what. So, and then again, you might be like, well, I'm expecting a crowd of like 5,000 people, and then it's a crowd of like 1,000 max, so that might throw you off, or um, just how judging goes, and
Right.
the whole setup, the getting onto the field, stuff like that is always different as well. So yeah, I think I can agree that most people are probably never truly 100% ready for their first competition.
Yeah, and that might be true. But when you guys had a competition, could you tell it was competition week?
Oh yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
like, like for me, it was like always the staff were like really on edge, or like, the directors were like really, really picky.
Right. And then at
Whereas
our
previous weeks they wouldn't be.
yeah, and we always had silent rehearsals for the week of competitions. Where,
Interesting.
yeah, we
Well,
weren't
why don't
allowed
you
to
tell me
talk.
how that worked? Because
It
I
was
didn't do those.
it was basically like weeks of competitions. Since we knew we had a lot of cleaning to do, maybe even some like drill change, um, basics block. So basically, after we, did basics block or we stretched and then we did basics block, like ran a lap just to get our bodies into the mood. Then and we would upper leadership would just sign, all right, it's silent rehearsals, so nobody would talk except for rehearsal techs or staff.
Right.
Um, and obviously, if there was like a long period of time where it was just one like little section, so like maybe one group of like 12 people were making a circle and they just couldn't get the circle done, then everybody else would just sit down. But like we had to keep the chatter very low, or else
Mm.
then the band director would get, mad and just be like, shut up. We're trying to fix drill here. Obviously didn't say shut up because high school or just public education, but yeah, the that Thursday, Saturday, or usually just silent rehearsals.
Yeah. The firsts for everything, I think, are just really stressful.
Yeah,
Um, Especially as for a new person. Um, it's a lot. I think that freshman year is a lot.
yeah,
And if you're able to get through your freshman year, might as well
easy.
stick around the
Yeah,
other three.
smooth sailing.
Smooth sailing because you're used to it now. You know what to expect.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think
I
you can rely on your upperclassmen a lot to
absolutely,
set the tone, and you can sort of just follow them because again, they've already done it before, so you can just follow their lead.
absolutely. Um, all that to say, I think if you're interested in getting into band, you're interested or if you're walking into a competitive program, or if you're a director thinking about getting your band into a competitive um, train, um, think about those things with regards to personally how things are going for you as you enter into that program, or if you're a director. These are some things that your students might be thinking.
Hmm.
Um, so check in with them on that. And get feedback and be okay with the feedback.
Yeah.
It's hard to be okay with feedback, but it's very important.
And I
Um,
just realized we've basically been going on for an hour, but we only touched high school. And there are a lot of people who only will do marching band in college. So don't
oh,
fret if you feel like, well, do do know that you can probably throw a lot of this out of the window if you are like, wait, I'm in college. None of this high school stuff
unless
pertains
it's
to
the
me.
exhibitions.
Right. But even then, the expedition is the mindset from a high school to a college person is much different.
Right.
So I guess just be on the lookout. One day, I'm sure we will do a first like college experiences. So don't fret if you're like, well, I got nothing out of that because this was only high school.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I definitely think that's worth circling back to for sure. Um, because we got to have content for the off season when
Yeah.
DCI is over.
Yeah. And we can always talk about like first indoor competitions or first WGI competitions because those are a whole nother breed. Because just like DCI, you basically have competition every single weekend, not unlike high school marching band where it's like maybe 3 to 4 competitions max.
Right.
Where some places really just do 2. So that's completely different as well.
Right.
Well, Harrison, do you got anything else for us?
Hydrate before you dihydrate. So
Yeah.
that's all I'm gonna say.
If your pee is any darker than a very mild, clear yellow, drink more water. I found it so funny at Kennesaw how they had the pee pallets
in
the
front
bathroom.
of the
Yeah.
urinals. Yeah, man, that was awkward.
I mean, I guess if it works, it works.
Yeah, I guess so. Did it work though?
I would assume so. I didn't see any people just like competitively trying not to drink a single drop of water at game day.
I don't know, man. There's some band people that are weird.
Yeah. Well,
but we love them anyway.
Yeah. If that's all, this has been the Marching Arts Podcast. You can find us anywhere on social medias at the Marching Arts Pod. That's BOD. If you want to meet my cat one day, maybe that'll be in the cards. But until then, we'll see you next time.